Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio. Your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Hi, and welcome to the Persistence Payoff Show. We're here on USA Global TV and Radio. I'm your host, Kimberly SCHAFER. I'm the inventor of the Ring Thing, which is a waterproof patented ring holder. I'm a first-time entrepreneur and inventor and just really enjoying this next chapter in my life. This show is focused on the quality of persistence and the payoffs that it brings to us. And there are a lot of them in our personal lives and in our professional lives. I'm really interested in talking to people who are experts and have experience with persistence and learn from them about their hows and their whys and what lessons we can take from that. There are a lot of opportunities for us to persist in our lives, and some of them are challenges. And it might be internally with our own mental self-talk. It might be with family and friends, our work. And now in the age of social media, sometimes we can face challenges that just blow up really quickly on social media that we have to face. So that brings me to our guest today, who I'm very excited to have on, Dave Oates, who's a crisis PR expert. Dave's 30 years of PR experience includes stints as a U.S. Navy Public Affairs Officer, Corporate Chief Marketing Officer, and Nonprofit President. He's handled a wide array of contentious matters that include employee and executive misconduct, cybersecurity attacks, product recalls, mass layoffs, large-scale accidents, criminal investigations, and civil litigation matters. A sought-after speaker, Dave teaches courses at San Diego State University's Journalism and Media Studies Department. He's also authored several Amazon ebooks and co-produced 4 LinkedIn learning courses. Dave is an accredited PR specialist who received his MBA from San Diego State University and his bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland. So welcome, Dave.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Thank you. I really appreciate your being with us. So I'd like to start by just learning more about your journey into PR and crisis PR. I know that started in the Navy. And can you talk with us about how that developed? Was that always an interest of yours, or did that develop more organically?
Yeah, it was organically. Thanks for asking. And it was a backwards way in which I got into this profession. I had really thought that my career was going to take a different path. When I was in college, I was a ROTC midshipman. I was getting my commission and was set to and did for the first half of a 9-year career drive ships. So I was a surface warfare officer, as they called it. And about a year and a half on my first ship, a guided missile frigate, I got the additional collateral duty job in addition to my combat position, combat officer position. At the time, I got the additional collateral duty job as a public affairs officer. And I was like, great. Not exactly sure what that entails, and found through various channels in the Navy what that meant. And that was communications, essentially, and in a sort of an executive level, if you want to put it more broadly, not only for the public when we would do port calls and tours and media as it was necessary, but also to helping the commanding officer communicate to our sailors and also the general sailors within, in our case, since we were based in San Diego, the San Diego community. And it was sort of my first foray, learning on the fly, asking a lot of questions, building a network of trained public affairs officers, that I started to get a feel for what the job really involved and how broad and in-depth and comprehensive it was. And as a guy in his mid-20s, you sort of had that light bulb come off and you went, oh, this is really what I want to do. And that's when I decided I want to try this for a career. And I found out that there were about 200 officers out of 330,000 service members and about 60,000 officers that did public affairs as their full-time job. And now I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to get in on that. And so amongst the San Diego Navy community, there were, I would say roughly probably about 6 to 8 Navy public affairs officers, maybe as high as a dozen that did that as their full-time job. And so once again, here I am, this young junior officer on the guided missile frigate, basically on his off-duty hours and when he could get away, knocked on doors and asked people, how do I get your job? How do I get in this community? And because the Navy, like a lot of good organizations, really pride themselves on apprenticeship, mentorship-based leadership, I learned from some really great masters of the craft how to not only do the job, but how to get transfer into that community from the Navy. And persistence, as you talked about, is sort of the lexicon of the show. I didn't get selected to transfer from a surface warfare officer specialty to a Navy public affairs officer until my third try. You have to put in deep, thick applications to DC, and it had to get reviewed by folks, and it was very tough to get into. It was very competitive. And it wasn't the first time or even the second time that I got selected. It was the third time. I had to continue to do my day job well as my collateral duty public affairs officers before I got a chance to do so. So for me, that was one of the early examples and really opportunities to understand persistence. I was hell-bent for leather to get into this job, and I wanted to see if I could do it in the Navy. And it's a matter of just keep swinging the bat, as I call it, having a love for baseball, and continually to try to build my credentials and do that, and do not be dissuaded by the first rejection or even the second rejection. So, and that started me on a career that then got me into crisis experience, both in forward deployed operations and local care. I went into the private sector about a quarter of a century ago, and I focused in technology, and particularly startup tech. Hung on my own shingle about 17 years ago and focus exclusively now on crisis communications for a wide range of organizations over the years. And my career has been about persistence and learning as I go and not being disheartened by the obstacles along the way, both professionally and personally, in all candor.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's so interesting. And then what was it about crisis PR that captured your interest, as opposed there's PR in other contexts, but what was it about crisis PR that was really interesting?
For the right organizations, for which I've had the privilege of working for most of my career, whether it was Navy or other entities, for the right and good organizations, you really add value in those moments where a matter of the entity's own doing, or maybe a false accusation or a misperception by somebody else, really puts the entity, right, government, nonprofit, corporate entity, corporate company, or its executives' reputation into question. And in those moments, if you do it right, you can help them communicate their way through bad situations, owning up to what they should own, taking action for which they should, expressing empathy, and being able to then rally other people to fix whatever the problem is, even if it's just simply a misperception, misunderstanding. And I think that's when people in the communications craft really show their mettle. I don't mean to sort of discount when people like me do promotional fun stuff, or it's a fun product launch, or whether it's a new movie or a new software application or something like that. Those are fun and those are important to get the word out. But I think it's really valuable when you have somebody who can help you articulate in very authentic and transparent terms what you're going to do about when times are bad. And so that's why I gravitate toward this. It's when organizations need you more than any other time. And I love being able to be of service in that regard.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because you must be walking into some very high stress situations with the companies, and you're also very wanted. it's stressful, but they want you to be there. And so that's they need you, and they want your advice.
Yeah, especially when you have circumstances where the executives either have an equity stake in the company or they're the founders of the company, as I often do. And I've done founders of companies for big, $500 million organizations to small mom and pop operations. They see their business, their nonprofit, their government agency as an extension of their identity. And so when it's called into question, it's really, they will view it as a threat upon themselves, a threat upon who they are. And the natural inclination, as it is for anybody, is to get very defensive, right? Is to get really argumentative. And I say most of the time there's a far better way to go through and communicate what you need to convey, and how you need to correct either the narrative self or correct whatever the mistake was, right? We're all human. In my 55 years on this earth, I'm becoming more and more aware that we are a very flawed species, myself notwithstanding, not myself included in that, I should say. And we all have opportunities to correct errors. Unfortunately, the world in which we live in with these wonderful little devices don't give us as much space to do that. And so we have to create it ourselves. And so I find myself, coming in to what is often a very tense and uncertain situation for a lot of people. And again, that's why I love what I do. I can come in and sort of be a voice of reason at times because I don't have the baggage of having sort of lived through this up to that point. And I've been privileged enough to be in the wrong places in the right time enough that I can usually spot the opportunities to make things better.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. And are there like maybe a handful, whether it's 3 or 4 pieces of advice that you start off talking to people about when you're walking in initially into a crisis situation? Like, okay, here's what we got to do. Here's what your mindset needs to be in order for us to address this.
Yeah. So at the time that the crisis is occurring, right? And by that definition is something is making it into one of your key audiences, whether it's employees or customers or partners or donors if you're a nonprofit, or taxpayers if you're a constituent. Something is now in the public eye, whether through a social media post, an online review page, a blog site like medium.com, or a traditional news outlet, like the LA Times or whatever, that is disrupting operations. People are now questioning whether you're the real deal. And they're starting to call in, email, asking for clarifications, maybe slowing down the frequency at which they do business. They're not placing orders and repeat orders as frequently as they did. Maybe they've got a big order in mind, but now they're going to hold off for a couple of weeks. Maybe your employees are starting to look elsewhere. Your good employees are starting to look elsewhere for their next job. Those kind of things. In those circumstances, you've got to come out with the who, what, where, when, what's going on, and what you're doing about it as quickly as you can. And it doesn't mean you necessarily have to have all the information, and you certainly don't want to speculate, but to the extent you know what's happening, you want to convey that as quickly as possible. People need to hear you. If you don't do that within a relatively short period of time, somebody else is going to set that narrative for you. And oftentimes it's going to be not correct, or it's certainly going to be misleading, or it's not complete. It's not in the proper context. And so you have to do that with pretty decent speed. The second thing that you companies and entities will want to do in a crisis is you want to start by communicating with your employees first. I really don't care what the crisis is. If your employees don't know what you're doing about it, you are doing yourself a disservice, because they're the ones who oftentimes are going to be your first line of communications with all of the other audiences, with your customers, with your business partners, with your donors. Because when they call in, those are the audiences to your organization. And an employee answers the phone, and that person on the other end says, "What's going on here?" And your employee has not been kept informed. They're going to respond by saying, "I don't know what's going on. No one's talking to me." And all that does is further confuse your authenticity to everybody else, including your employees. So I say you got to start with your employees first. Don't wait for the rest of them, but don't forget that you can make a difference by getting your employees to understand what's going on and what you're doing about it, so they can convey that to everybody else. And it's much more powerful, your message, in that context, than when a company simply just puts out a press release or puts up a social media post and says nothing else. And that leads me to the third thing. You've got to be ready to continue the dialogue, to continue the communications. It's not a one and done in a crisis. We all know that continued conversations are necessary to correct the narrative or to fix whatever is wrong. And you need to continue to do that in very frequent fashion. Let people know that you care and that you're working on it, and what the status is, and how you are making progress to fix whatever the issue is. Those are the three things I tell organizations of all sizes, of all entities, of all industries, is you got to say something as soon as you can. You've got to start with your employees and keep updating as you know more information and as you're working on progressing, making progress in this issue, so people know that you care. Those are three paramount disciplines in any crisis situation.
Yeah, that's a great advice. And I'm curious, as you were talking, I was wondering, for the first item, the first recommendation about own it, come out and say, own whatever you need to own. Is that the hardest for people to do when they're in a crisis situation? Like, you talked earlier about sometimes people are in a defensive mode, and is it challenging for them to kind of go, okay, wait, let me just own this and get past that?
I appreciate the question. The answer is sort of. Most again, if somebody wants to use me to sort of categorically deny something and appear like every other mouthpiece on cable television or whatever, pick a channel, right? I'm not your guy, right? Don't use me as a human shield. I'm not a public defender. I'll toss that fish back in the pond without thinking twice about it. But most companies just want to try to do the right thing, and they will admit to me in my first conversation, like, what went wrong? And they said, hey, we didn't get this product out on time, or we goofed up on this area, or this happened. And they'll own that right away. Where it gets sticky is because of the world in which we live in, where we're all tied to our smartphones and the social media apps, is how quickly somebody takes exception to it and creates this really crazy, hyperbolic post that not only talks about whatever that small issue was, whatever the mistake was, but now takes it way out of context and starts talking about how screwed up the organization is, how greedy the executives are. And when you start getting into those type of personal attacks is when entities will really defend themselves, because now they feel like they're just being overrun and everybody goes into fight mode. If I can get them back to sort of addressing that little bit, and we communicate that and what they're doing about it, it usually does two things. First off, it diffuses at least the level of animosity that you see in social media and in news organizations, because all people really want to know is that they're hurt. And when you say, yep, I hear you, this is what happened and this is what we're doing about it, we apologize for that, everybody else sort of gives a little bit more space to all the other nonsense that people generally tune out right away, and gives people at least a second thought to give that organization another chance. And chances are, if that organization is authentic, empathetic, and action oriented in its response in a rapid fashion, you can really actually boost your reputation because everybody knows you care. It's when you sort of follow sort of I said hyperbolic before, and all the hyperbole that happens around it, and you get caught up in that and you get defensive, that you raise the level of animosity. Now you're screaming and shouting at them. You don't know what you're talking about. You got it all wrong. I can't believe you're even talking about this. You don't have any basis for what you're saying. And while they may be understandably upset that somebody's making some really ridiculous accusations, if they don't get back to that modicum of truth and they go with and they argue with all this other nonsense, what happens is that now everybody starts to believe that maybe there is something there. Maybe you're protesting too much. And so when they find that little nugget of error, now it's really out of bounds and out of proportion. It's just going to cost you more to repair that in the long run. So I really spent a lot of time trying to get everybody back to center. What's the root problem? How can we fix that? How can we communicate that and move forward?
Yeah. Yeah, you must be really good at reading the room. Like when when you walk into a situation and are meeting with the company, reading. Do you feel like over the decades that you've gotten that sense of like, okay, this is going to be, they're going to take my advice and implement it, or I'm going to have
Yeah.
a little bit more of a challenge to get them to do that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. The answer is yes, and it's only because I've gotten
Mhm.
kicked in the teeth so many times in the last 30 years that I've learned that. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed by any means, so I've learned as to go on as to where people at, and it's also I've worked really hard, particularly over the last 2 years, in sort of being centered myself, working on my mental health, and that's also helped me to be a better crisis communications person because if I am grounded and if I am centered, then I can see where everybody else is at and I can empathize more as somebody's upset. And I do, like I tell clients to do to the audiences. If somebody's upset at me because they're feeling overwhelmed and they just want this thing go away, I usually will start off with a response that says something like, I get why you want to feel that way. Your reputation is now
Mm,
being dragged into a ridiculous level that shouldn't be. And I understand why you're upset. Here's how we can diffuse that situation quickly, and it may not necessarily be the one that you are you think is the right course of action in sort of your reaction state, but hear me out. And then I walk them through the plan. And by the way, I try to do all that at least at a high level within about an hour, because
mm,
as we all know, with various video reels and posts on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, you may not have a lot of time to sort of think about this. You've got to go with a tried and true, authentic and empathetic and action oriented message pretty quickly before everybody else just fills in that narrative void.
yes. Yeah. And I would imagine, I mean, that perhaps many, if not most of your clients, it's a confidential agreement about, not talking about them, but you did
Yeah.
have the one client in Maui with a tourist boat, after the Maui fires, that they have talked publicly about your work with them. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that situation and how they persevered through that, really a PR crisis that they were
Uh,
facing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that was a great example about having well intended uh, uh, activities be taken way out of context. So, you remember the big fires in Lanai that were just horrific and so much devastation and so much history that was lost in that one there. There's a snorkeling excursion company, Maui Snorkeling, that gives gives pleasure snorkeling excursions to tourists. They take them out on a boat. They have these wonderful little activities. When the fires broke out, they had already had a tour group scheduled to go within like 3 or 4 days afterwards. And the owners were going to cancel it, but the tourists had asked, can we please go on this? We need a respite. We need something to take our minds off of what's going on. And the owners, after some deliberation, said, okay, we're going to do this, but we will donate all the proceeds from this
Mm,
event to the local rescue and restorations efforts. So they said they were basically going to cover all of the operational costs, all the team members' salaries, the gas for the boat, all of the other equipment and the things that were on there, and donate all of the sales from that one to the effort. So they went on the excursion. Well, as you can imagine, people on the beach seeing others having a great time while the fires were ravaging took out their little portable communications devices, as we talk about in the broadcasting, and started recording that. And it blew up all over social media. USA Today called, the local Maui and Hawaii press called, and other national news, and it really just knocked the owners for a loop. And so we came in, were able to correct the narrative right away. And then some of the lessons learned were, in a case like that, there probably should have been needed to be some advanced communication, some
mm,
understanding of people saying, hey, we're going to do this event. Here's our intention. Here's what we're going to do about it. So at least that was out there in the social media realm and the blogs beforehand. Hey, lesson learned. Hindsight's always 2020. And so in this case, um, you know, it all went well afterwards, but probably could have been avoided at least a little bit. But I was privileged to be of service to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and good for them for persevering through that, and also trying to help the people who were devastated by the fires, because that was a horrible, horrific thing that happened there. So yeah, that is a great example. And a question I have as we've been talking is, so you come in usually during a crisis to help people.
Yeah,
You also offer services to companies or individuals on way to prevent a PR crisis.
I do. And like everybody else, right? I think when it comes to adverse matters, a lot of businesses, particularly small regional businesses, don't see themselves as potential targets for somebody to really discredit them and disrupt their operations, because they say, hey, we've got good clients, we've got good customers. Why do we have to worry about that so much? Well, it's because, as I've been saying a couple times now, everybody's a broadcaster with their smartphone. Everybody has the power with a camera, microphone, and a distribution service, which is their social media accounts, to really have a bigger voice than sometimes the local 6 o'clock news or the local newspapers. And so what I tell organizations is, you have to understand your hard-earned reputation can be soiled by somebody overnight because their nose got out of joint because of something you may have said or something a staff member may have said when they walked into your storefront or logged in on your web portal. And so you don't want to be the last person to know that somebody's talking about you. So I say the first thing is, keep an eye on the internet chatter, and there are free services to do so. Google has an alert system. Literally, it's alerts.google.com. If you have a Gmail account, you can put in there, in quotations, your organization's name, your executive's name, and you can set up that within a couple hours of something being posted, you're going to get an alert from that. And there's also some freemium-based pricing for social media monitoring tools that you can use. And I think every organization, even if you don't generate any business through an online entity, you don't through an e-commerce engine or some sort of online scheduling tool, you will need to know if somebody's talking about you, because your brand and your reputation are oftentimes won or lost because of that. Even if if I had, word of mouth marketing and I said, hey, Kimberly, I have a friend, I told him about your product, your ring things, and I said, they really need to talk to you. Even if you were just selling that in like farmers markets, not even online, chances are somebody's going to Google your name and the company to see what it's all about. And if
Yes.
you have chatter that has been unchecked online, that's going to appear on the front page of Google. So don't be the last person to know somebody's talking about you, and then respond to the negative chatter when you can. And again, the third thing is with empathy and action. And it's a very artful way to respond with authenticity without necessarily apologizing for things for which you don't. And with the idea that you're not necessarily trying to change the mindset of the person who made the comment, but you're trying to telegraph to everybody else who sees that post that you care and that you're taking action, and that they might not necessarily want to give this review or this comment or this post that kind of weight. And most people will give you the benefit of the doubt in those cases. It's when organizations don't know what's going on in those type of chatters and don't respond, or respond with anger, that they, inadvertently give credence and validation to that comment in that post. And all of a sudden that becomes the truth, whether it is or not.
Interesting. Do you feel that every PR crisis can be addressed, that you can persevere through any PR crisis? Or are there certain situations, have you ever come into a situation and just said, yeah, I don't think we can address this?
Oh, I appreciate that. I guess the general answer is yes, every PR crisis can be resolved in the organization's favor. But there's a couple of things that need to happen. First off, I mentioned before, you need to respond quickly. I've had circumstances where somebody has come to me about a matter that occurred 6 months ago, and because of their lack of response at the time, it's now cemented in chatter and in posts and in comments on that first page of Google in a search that I mentioned. And I tell them, it's going to take a lot to disrupt it. You can still do that, but you're looking at 18 months to 2 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop other content to fix that. And that's probably the second thing, is I would say, is you also need to have your own internet presence. You have to protect and promote your brand online and offline, even if you don't necessarily generate, like I said, business by either channel. You need to recognize that your brand is part of the value of your organization. Even nonprofits, it has value in being able to generate donations and support and the like. And so you have to have an active internet presence, and you have to respond to those matters in a short order. The third thing, and I think this is probably not to be undersold, is you've got to be, by and large, a generally good entity, right? If you are practicing on a regular basis shortcuts or different, what I would just call not above board and non-transparent business practices, particularly as it relates to your employees and your customers and your business partners. In other words, if you're just a bad business and a bad leader, you can't really fix that with a PR campaign. That's an inherent flaw in the business, and those companies probably should be out of business. And I don't say that with any great fanfare. I just, there are bad individuals and there are bad companies out there that should be out of business, and no PR campaign's gonna be able to whitewash over that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a great point. I'm curious to know, looking back over your 30 years of doing this work, is there any one thing or a couple of things that have really surprised you in a positive way about your work?
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. And this is probably as much of a, not only just a professional observation as a personal observation. We can get caught up in so much negativity and the animosity that we have and divisiveness that we have as a society. But the term I've started to use over the last almost 2 years now is the term being confidently vulnerable. And if you can believe enough of yourself, if you believe you're enough and you're working on yourself, and you can be that confidently vulnerable leader, and then by extension entity, to your employees, to your customers, to your partners, I am still very thankful and grateful for how many people, whether it's close family members, employees, or customers, can give people grace. And I've seen that in many different forms and flavors in my, not only my professional career, but my personal life. And that always gives me hope. That gives me promise. And I use that term often in conversations that I have in presentations like this and in client engagements, is the term confidently vulnerable. And I can't take credit for that. I met a courageous young woman in my volunteer efforts, as Kim, you and I have done on anti-human trafficking, who coined that phrase. The woman's name is Caitlin Radigan. And I've seen her speak, and she used that term, and I've adopted it since then and give her full credit for that.
Yeah, I love that term. That's going to stay with me. That's beautiful. And, and talk about persevering. You're right. You and I are both engaged in anti-human trafficking work here in San Diego, and volunteering, and you more so. And talk about persevering with the survivors of human trafficking, persevering to recover, and through recovery is really inspiring. It's something.
You chaired that task force as long as I chaired it, so I'm grateful to your service and what you've done for that. But yeah, the survivors certainly give me hope and inspire me. But I'll tell you what also inspires me. I've been teaching for, as you mentioned, I've been teaching part-time at San Diego State for the last year, and I've done, like you, some mentorships at the high school level, and continue to do so through our respective Rotary clubs. And I am also really buoyed by the young people who are going through their own challenges, as a lot of teenagers certainly do, and some, with greater obstacles than others. But their ability to find their own truth and follow their North Star and persevere also gives me hope, and how they can still look out for each other. I know there's a lot of conversations that I've seen in the business circles about the generation today, and do they have that type of fortitude and that type of perseverance and that type of willingness to work really hard. And the answer I give is absolutely yes. They just, and sometimes they can teach us, at least that's been my experience. I'm sure that I know that there are certainly others that don't have that, but I think they don't have it is because they haven't been shown it. And so let's be that guiding post. Let's be that mentor to help them find it. And in turn, they've helped me in the process.
Wow, that's really very powerful, very, very powerful and encouraging to hear, because I've also heard that about, the younger generation having a different view about work and perseverance. And so it's very, very happy to hear that. And do you feel that perhaps they have a little advantage in PR work in the sense that they've grown up with social media? And for us, social media kind of came into existence in the middle of our lives or later. And, for them, they've grown up with it. So the idea of things going viral, or how do you address PR crises, like in your classes at San Diego State, do you feel that they have an advantage in that way?
I don't, I guess my answer would be they have an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is obviously the understanding that they can be their own broadcaster, and they can certainly communicate in very authentic and transparent ways immediately. And to some of them, they recognize the value in doing so. But I would also submit to you that, and I think there's studies that have shown this to be true, that we are overwhelmed with information, and young people may not necessarily know when to shut it off. More to the point, I think there's this imposter syndrome that comes about by looking at other people's feeds and seeing what has been portrayed as the perfect life. And I mean, I see it in people of our age and people that we know that are just like, oh, it's perfect, and aren't we great, and we're just one big happy and it's just not true. Them to be not that case, and they are trying to use social media to escape that. And I think for a lot of young people, particularly ones that are still trying to find themselves and find their North Star and be true to themselves, that's a real tough set of circumstances. And then add the bullying elements that can come into play on social media. I appreciate when parents sort of put limitations on that. I think you have to look at it in the same way that I think our parents looked at the television. It's like, you can watch television for 1-2 hours a day, and then you're turning that damn thing off, and you're going to go outside and play, or you're going to read a book, or you're going to do something like that. I think we probably should have the same limitations on that, because as wonderful the abilities are to communicate, I think sometimes we get wrapped into a narrative and a world that really, for many people, is just a form of escape, and a dangerous one at that.
Yeah, that makes really good sense. I hadn't thought of it that way. That makes really good sense. And well, this is so great. I feel like I could keep talking to you for another hour or two. This is a rich topic, and I appreciate everything.
I could talk for an hour too now, especially since I got that frog out of my throat about 20 minutes ago. So I appreciate you letting me take a drink of water while we're doing this interview. This has been a ton of fun, Kim. It's so good to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you. Thank you. And can you let people know how they can connect with you if they want to connect with you in any way?
Yeah. And hopefully this doesn't sound like I'm being contradictory, but yes, you can find me on, I tell people, Google me, Dave Oates, Crisis PR. My LinkedIn profile will show up. My website will show up. And on my website, people can, schedule 15 minutes with me for a conversation that they had. Oh, thanks for putting that up there. I appreciate that. And as put in the chat, that's my email address. It comes literally to my inbox. I'd be happy to have a conversation, particularly if you are dealing with a matter or there's something percolating that you, as I say, if I hear the words, I hope this doesn't get out, Well, as we know, hope is not a strategy. Have a conversation with me. But if responding quickly, we can certainly get through. We certainly get through the tough times, and staying confidently vulnerable with empathy and action and authenticity. We can do great things. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. I appreciate you.
It's good to see you.
All right. Thank you. Likewise. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I absolutely could keep talking with him for another hour at least. This is really great insights and great information. So you can connect with me in a couple of ways through the Ring Thing website, which is ringthing.com. I'm also on Instagram at ring_thing_. And the show is here twice a month, every other Tuesday at noon Pacific time. So please join us. And I do want to end with just a quote from Bryant McGill about persistence. And he says, "Persistence is the most traveled path to success." And I think that was really well exemplified with what Dave was sharing with us about his work with companies and their need to just persist and get through and successfully get through their PR crises. So thank you, Dave, so much. Thank you, USA Global TV and Radio, and Dr. Jacqueline. We'll see you next time.
Get ready for Talking Heads, the show where expert insights meet world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. Brought to you by USA Global TV and Radio. Meet our distinguished presenters. From the great state of Texas, longevity expert, award-winning author, publisher, and distinguished Toastmaster, Red O'Loughlin. From London, England, soul heart awakener, novelist, vocal coach, and artist, Dr. Madeline Chan. Also from England, the Harley Street stress expert, therapist, ambassador for peace, and speaker, Carolyn Heward. And from Australia, ICF PCC credentialed coach, entrepreneur, and leadership coach, Mariska Dupria. Experience their expertise, connect with their wisdom, and transform your perspective. Watch Talking Heads on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. This video and its contents are the property of USA Global TV and Radio. All rights reserved. Terms and conditions apply. Visit usaglobaltv.com for more details.
Have you ever felt unheard? Like your words float into a void, leaving you invisible and disconnected? How about feeling judged, when assumptions overshadow your truth, leaving you misunderstood and defensive? And then there's that moment when someone offers solutions you never asked for, dismissing your feelings and leaving you more frustrated than before. It doesn't have to be this way. Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, the listening mentor, understands. She's here to help you reclaim your voice, build stronger connections, and create meaningful conversations that inspire understanding and mutual respect. Through her groundbreaking books, online and in-person courses, and interactive workshops, you'll learn how to navigate life's most challenging interactions. Discover the power of elevated listening and transform how you communicate. Master setting boundaries and asking permission to protect your peace. Learn to recognize and release judgment, fostering empathy and true connection. Dr. Kerbeck also offers personalized coaching, one-on-one or group sessions, designed to fit your unique needs. Whether in person or virtually on StreamYard, her guidance will empower you to thrive. You don't have to struggle alone. The path to deeper connections and better relationships start here. Visit drjacqueline.com or usaglobaltv.com. Join a global community of empowered listeners and transform your life, one meaningful conversation at a time. Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck is the listening mentor. Start your journey today.